You're best known for forming relationships with members of the Ku Klux Klan and helping them and getting them to change their perspectives. What first made you interested in getting to know members of the Klan?
Well, that has to go back to my childhood. My parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, U.S. State Department. So I grew up as an American Embassy kid, and I began traveling around the world at the age of 3 in 1961, because I was born in 1958. And how it works is you get assigned to a foreign country for 2 years with the U.S. Embassy, and then you come back home here to the States. You're here perhaps for a few months, maybe a year, and then you get reassigned abroad. So back and forth, every 2 years, were the formative years of my life. My first introduction to school was abroad. I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all in different schools in different countries. Now the interesting, and then of course the in-between grades I did back home here. But the interesting thing was my classmates abroad back in the 60s were from all over the world. Because anybody who had an embassy station where we had our U.S. embassy, all of their kids went to the same school. So this little girl sitting at this little desk right here might have been from Japan, this kid from Nigeria, that kid from Italy, the kid from behind me from Russia. That was my norm. That was my first introduction to school. So that became what my baseline for school was supposed to be. But every time I'd come back home after my parents' assignment, I would be either in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. Just because desegregation was passed by our U.S. Supreme Court in 1954, which is 4 years before I was born, schools did not integrate overnight. It took years and years. And even today, in 2025, or actually 2026 now, right? Some places in our country are still struggling with integration. So one of the times I came home was 1968, and I was in fourth grade, age 10. I was one of 2 black kids in the entire school. It was a newly integrated school, so just 2 black kids, me in fourth grade and a little black girl in second grade. So consequently, all of my friends were fourth and fifth graders, and of course they all were white. And some of my male friends invited me to join the Cub Scouts. So I joined Cub Scouts in 1968. I was the only black scout anywhere in the area. This was in Massachusetts. And we had a parade along with the Girl Scouts, the Brownies, the Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, 4-H Club, different organizations to commemorate the ride of Paul Revere. I was the only black participant. The streets were blocked off, sidewalks were lined with nothing but white people. They all were waving and cheering and smiling, yelling the British are coming and all that kind of thing, until we reached a certain point in this parade route when suddenly, pow, I'm getting hit by rocks and soda pop bottles, soda pop cans, just by a very small group of spectators off to my right on the sidewalk. Not everybody was doing this, just this maybe 4 or 5 people. I remember there being a couple of kids, maybe a year or 2 older than me, I didn't know them, and a couple of adults who I assume were their parents, who were throwing things and yelling and screaming. And when I turned to see what was hitting me or who was throwing whatever, I saw them mixed in with the larger crowd. And my first thought was, oh, these people over here, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was, because I had no precedent for that kind of behavior. I was raised around everybody. When I say everybody, I mean everybody from all over the world, and I assumed that they didn't like the Scouts. I didn't realize I was the only scout getting hit until my scout leaders came running. Of course, they were white as well, and covered me with their bodies and quickly escorted me out of this danger. And I kept saying, "What did I do? I didn't do anything. Why are they doing this?" I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and all they're doing is kind of shushing me and rushing me along, telling me to keep moving. Everything will be fine. I kept moving, but they never answered my question. So at the end of the parade, of course, I went home. My mother and father were not at the parade, but they were home when I got there. And they were looking at me and asking me, how did you trip and fall down and get all scraped up? And they're putting Band-Aids on me and cleaning me up. I told them I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what had happened. And for the first time in my life, at the age of 10, my mother and father sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Believe it or not, at the age of 10, I had never even heard the word racism because it did not exist in my world. I was around people from all over the world, and they didn't behave like that. When my parents were telling me this, literally, I did not believe them because my 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that someone who had never seen me, never spoken to me, knew nothing about me, would want to hurt me for no other reason than the color of my skin. It just made no sense. And to prove that I was right and my parents were wrong, I pointed out the fact that the people, my friends overseas, from Sweden or from France or Germany, looked just like the people on the sidewalk. My fellow Americans at the embassy looked just like the people on the sidewalk. My fellow scouts, my schoolmates, like that. So color had nothing to do with it. They assured me that it did. 1968, right? Martin Luther King was assassinated that same year, and I remember it very well. I was 10, but I remember it. April 4th. Every major city nearby Boston, we were like 8 miles outside of Boston. Every major city, Chicago, where I was born, right here, Washington, D.C., Boston, Philadelphia, Detroit, you name it. Every major city burned to the ground with violence and destruction, all in the name of this new word I had learned called racism. So now I understood that my parents had not lied to me. They told me the truth. I just didn't know why this phenomenon existed. So at that age, I formed a question in my mind, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I've been looking for the answer to that question ever since. So I purchased a ton of books, and I still do, on black supremacy, white supremacy, anti-Semitism, racism, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, looking for the answers. My books talk about it, but they don't tell me why. And when I would ask people, they would say, oh, Daryl, some people are just like that. That's just the way it is. Well, that's not an answer, at least not one that placates my curiosity. So I went to Howard University after high school, and I graduated with my degree in music and became a professional musician. Music became my profession, but trying to learn more about race relations became my obsession. And there came a point where country music had made a resurgence. It had never gone away completely, but it had fallen off the top 40 charts. It was replaced by disco and R&B and whatever else, right? But a movie came out with John Travolta called Urban Cowboy. Had a lot of country music in there. So it was a big box office hit. So a lot of the bars and clubs that had music switched their format to country. I like country music. It's no different than the blues. It's the same 3 chords. It's society that puts us in categories. If you're white and you're playing this song, it's country. If you're black and you're playing the same song, it's the blues, So it's man that puts us in these boxes. So anyway, I joined a country band, and I was the only black guy in the band. And they were pretty well established here in the Maryland area. And they had a gig up in Frederick, Maryland, at a place called the Silver Dollar Lounge. I knew the Silver Dollar Lounge. I'd never been there. I'd seen it, but I'd never been there. But I knew its reputation. It was not welcoming to black people. There were no signs like, you would see in your American history books, colored water fountain, whites only, restroom, or something like that. Nothing like that. It was an unspoken, tacit, if you will, feeling. You're not welcome there. So I never went in there. Well, the band had played there before. It's an all-white band. So now I'm in the band, and they have a gig at the Silver Dollar. So I go. I got some looks when I went in, but nobody bothered me, not that night. And we finished our first set, and I'm following the band to go sit down on the break to the table, and I felt somebody from behind put their arm across my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in this joint, right? So I'm turning around trying to see who's touching me, thinking, I got to get ready for this. And there was a white gentleman, maybe 15 to 20 years older than me. Big smile on his face. And he says, "Man, I sure love your all's music." I said, "Thank you, sir," and I shook his hand. And he pointed at the stage and said, "I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you before. Where'd you come from?" And I explained, "Well, yes, they told me they played here before, but this is my first time. I just joined the band a couple months ago." "Man, I sure love your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." Now, Jerry Lee Lewis, for a lot of your young viewers who may not know who he was, he passed away a few years ago. He was at the dawning age of rock and roll, along with Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Elvis Presley, and those were his contemporaries. And he was a wild man on the piano, had a very unique style. So anyway, he had compared me to Jerry Lee, and I was not offended by his statement, but I was rather surprised, given the fact that he was at least a decade and a half to 2 decades older than me, that he did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's piano style. And I proceeded to explain to him that Jerry Lee got it from the same place I did, from black blues and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where that rock and roll, rockabilly sound evolved. "Oh, no, I ain't never heard no black man play like that, except for you." I said, "Look, man," I said, "I know Jerry Lee." Oops.
That's okay.
I said, "I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. And he's told me himself, where his influences came from." Well, he didn't believe that either. But he was very insistent that I come back to his table and let him buy me a drink. I was a novelty for him. And I don't drink alcohol, but I agreed to go back to his table and have a cranberry juice. He purchased my cranberry juice, paid the waitress, and he takes his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me. And he says, "This is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man." Now, I was not offended, but I was very curious, because given the fact that at this point in my life, I'm a lot younger than him, I had sat down with thousands, tens of thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. How is it that this guy had never sat down with a black guy before? I know for a fact that there are black people in Frederick, Maryland. I've seen them. So how did he never come across them or something, right? And I innocently asked him, I said, "Why?" He stared at the tabletop, didn't answer me. I asked him again, and his buddy elbowed him, sitting next to him, and said, "Tell him, tell him, tell him." I said, "Tell me, because now I'm curious." And it's like a mystery. And he says, "I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan." Well, I burst out laughing at him because I did not believe him. I know a lot about the Klan. Like I said, I have every book written on the Klan. And I know for a fact they don't just walk up to a black guy and put their arm around him and embrace him and want to hang out and buy him a drink and have a conversation. It doesn't work that way. So if it did, it wouldn't be a Ku Klux Klan. So anyway, I'm laughing, think the guy's joking. He went in his pocket, pulled out his wallet, flipped through it, and handed me his Klan membership card. I recognized the Klan emblem, which is a red circle with a white cross and red blood drop in the center, and I stopped laughing. This card was for real, and now I'm sitting here wondering, what on earth am I doing sitting at a table with a Klansman in this crazy place, right? I gave him back his card, and we talked, some things about the Klan, talked about other things, but he was very friendly and very curious about me. And he gave me his phone number, wanted me to call him whenever I was to return to the Silver Dollar Lounge with this band, because he wanted to invite his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to come see, as he put it to me, the black guy who plays like Jerry Lee. I don't know that he called me the black guy to his friends, but that's how he explained it to me. I said, okay. So I would call him every 6 weeks and say, "Hey man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar on the weekend." He'd come, he'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen, not in robes and hoods, but street clothes, and they'd gather near the bandstand and watch me play with the band. They'd get out on the dance floor and dance. And on the breaks, I'd make my way over to his table and thank them for coming. Two of them, when they saw me coming, would get up and walk to the other side of the room. So the implied message was, "We don't want to talk to you, we don't want to shake your hand, we just want to look at you," which was fine by me. So I'd hang out there and talk with whoever was there. And then I quit that band at the end of the year and I went back to playing rock and roll and blues and R&B, whatever. Let me turn this thing off. Very sorry about that.
That's okay. A little background music.
Yeah, that's my my ringtone. Put it on silent here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. So I went back to playing other forms of music. And a few years later, it dawned on me. You know, I didn't stay in contact with them. Why would I stay in contact with the Ku Klux Klan, right? I was just up there to play music, and he happened to be part of the audience. But it dawned on me a few years later, Daryl, the answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, it fell right into your lap. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization with over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them or who don't believe as they believe. Get back in contact with that Klansman and get him to fix you up with the Klan leader from Maryland. Start in Maryland, then go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and interview other Klan leaders and members and write a book. Because no book had been written by a black author on the Ku Klux Klan from the perspective of in-person, face-to-face interviews. There have been 2 books written by black authors that dealt with the Klan, but each author detailed how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and one in the 1940s by the Klan, all right? But not from interviewing their prospective lynchers. That's what I wanted to do. So that's how that all started.
Wow. And so you wound up getting connected with the Grand Wizard for Maryland, right? And
Yeah, let me give you the hierarchy of the Klan.
Okay.
Grand Wizard is an old term, but you know when the Klan was first formed, they called the national leader the Grand Wizard.
Gotcha.
Okay, but then when it spread out to other states, if you have a chapter now today, there's no such thing as the Ku Klux Klan. There are many Ku Klux Klan groups, and they all are autonomous. They use the same colors on their robes, the same secret handshake, the same titles, passwords, etc., and basically the same rules. But they are autonomous. They have split off from the original through infighting and whatever else goes on. People split and form their own groups. So now, if you have a chapter of your particular Klan group in another state, in addition to your state, or in multiple states, you may then consider yourself to be a national Klan group. Therefore, you must appoint a national leader. Like we call our national leader who oversees all the states the president. They call theirs the Imperial Wizard. Anybody who is prefixed with the title Imperial means that person is a national officer, Wizard being the top. An Imperial Caliph would be like a vice president. All right. So then, below the Imperial Wizard, who is the national leader, you have to have state leaders. We call every state leader a governor. They call their state leader a Grand Dragon.
Grand Dragon.
Gotcha. So Grand means state level.
Gotcha.
All right. Back in the original days of the Klan, the Grand Wizard was the title, but now they've subdivided it, right? So Grand Dragon means like governor.
Gotcha.
A Grand Caliph would be like a lieutenant governor, and you have secretary, treasurer, and then rank and file. But then below the state level, you have the county level. Here in Maryland, we call our county leader the county executive. Some states call it the county manager or other titles, right? They call that person the Great Titan. So the great level is the county level. Within the county, you have districts. We call the district leader a councilman. Other places call it the selectman or alderman or whatever, mayor. They call that person the exalted cyclops. And below the cyclops are just plain rank and file Klansmen and Klanswomen.
So your friend would have been the Grand Dragon then for
The first
Maryland?
interview that I did was with the Grand Dragon. The guy that I initially met, who hooked me up with the Grand Dragon, he didn't want to do it. He was fearful for his life, and mine too. But he was just a rank and file Klan member.
So tell me about the connection with the Grand Dragon, how that happened, and how I've listened to your TED Talks about how the first meeting went, but
Sure.
how that relationship formed where you guys became friends.
Okay, sure. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to start right here in Maryland. I want to interview the Grand Dragon of Maryland, and then I'll work my way to Imperial Wizard and whatever else, and just plain Klansmen and Klanswomen. So the guy that I met in the Silver Dollar Lounge, I persuaded him to give me the Grand Dragon's address and phone number because he didn't want to take me there and introduce me to the guy. He was fearful that if he were to bring a black man to this guy, we both would be in trouble. So he gave me this person's information on the condition that I not tell the Grand Dragon where I got his personal information. I said, okay. So I had my secretary, he warned me. He said, Daryl, do not fool with him. He will kill you. And I'm like, well, that's why I need to see him. Why would he kill me? Just because of the color of my skin. This makes no sense. This is what I'm trying to understand. And of course, I want to get it right from the horse's mouth, right? So I had my secretary, who at the time, she's passed on now, but she was white. And I only mention that because I could care less what color somebody is, but it plays into the story. I figured her name was Mary. I'll have Mary call this guy, because if I call him, he might detect in my voice that I'm black and say, I'm not talking to you. Click. And my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. So I knew if Mary called him, he would know that the voice on the other end of this phone is a white woman. And I knew enough about the mentality that he would not automatically think that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they did not exist. So therefore, that person must be a white guy, right? And that might up the odds that he would agree to do this interview. And if he agreed to it, then obviously he would see that I'm black when he comes to see me and do the interview. So I explained to her, do not tell him that I'm black. If he asks, don't lie to him, but don't give him reason to ask. So long story short, he didn't ask, he agreed to do the interview, and we set it up for a room in the motel above the Silver Dollar Lounge. And he showed up with an armed bodyguard, wearing Klan camouflage and the red circle cross blood drop patch on his chest, and the letters KKK on this side, and embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and a semi-automatic handgun in his holster. And the Grand Dragon came in wearing a suit and tie. And when they came into the room and saw me, they like freaked, they froze, because they were expecting a white guy. And I'm sitting there, looking at them, and I can read their faces. I know what they were thinking. They were thinking, do we misunderstand the room number from the desk clerk, or is this an ambush? So I stood up and I went like this to show I had nothing in my hands. And I approached them. I said, hi, I'm Daryl Davis. And I extended my right hand. He shook my hand. The bodyguard shook my hand. And so far, so good. So we came in, and that's where the first interview took place. And then a couple of years later, the Grand Dragon became an Imperial Wizard.
And so how did you form a friendship with him? How did you get to the point where you were able to, have him over at your house and, just have this relationship?
Excellent question. Okay, so when you are having a conversation with your adversary, regardless of how far apart you may be on the ideological, political, religious, whatever spectrum, if you spend 5 minutes with your worst adversary, you're going to find something in common, and that gap is going to narrow. You keep on talking for another 5-10 minutes, you're going to find more in common. And now you're here, right? You may not be going to his birthday party or whatever, but you're having a cordial relationship with somebody who you are diametrically opposed to, right? And you keep on talking, you found so much in common when you're here. It's like a friendship. You don't agree with this person, but they're friendly, you're friendly. And what's happening is, it's causing a cognitive dissonance in their brain. Because at this point, they have found so much more in common with you than they have in contrast. Because all the beliefs and myths that they had believed are getting dispelled, right? So and at this point, they found more in common than in contrast, that the trivial things they have in contrast, like skin color, or whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple, begin to matter less and less. And then they began questioning themselves, how can I hate that person? I mean, he's just like I am, right? Now, when that gets to that point, when I feel safe, I'm not so much worried about my safety, but when I feel that this person is safe for me to introduce some of my friends to him, right? Because I would invite him over. He would sit right there where you're sitting, and the bodyguard would sit next to him. Sometimes the bodyguard would get bored and pull out his gun and do like this, twirl it on his finger, while the Grand Dragon or Imperial Wizard, whichever one he was at the time, were talking across the table here. And anyway, but when I feel safe enough that I don't feel that he would pose a threat to any of my friends, I will invite over some of my other friends to meet him. Some of my black friends, some of my Jewish friends, some of my white friends who don't share his beliefs. And that way he can see that Daryl is not an exception. Maybe he's the exception. Maybe he needs to rethink. Because the last thing I want him to think is, Daryl's okay for a black guy. It's all those other black people that, that have these problems or whatever. No, not necessarily. You can't paint a broad brush across anybody, white, black, or Asian, Hispanic, or otherwise. Mm-hmm. So over time, we'd find all these things in common. And lo and behold, some years later, he was really struggling with that. And he left. He left. He gave me his robe and hood and some other things. And this would happen time and time again. Now in 2026, I've been doing this now for 46 years.
How many Klansmen or leaders in the Klan, how many people have you formed relationships with, would you say?
Oh, gosh. I'd say probably, I know that over 200 have left. In terms of having relationships with them, I'd say close to 100, maybe a few more.
Over 200 have left as a result of your conversations with them.
Yes.
How does that feel for you?
I feel vindicated in my belief that people can change. As a kid, you may have been told, I know I was told, many people were told, growing up, a tiger does not change his stripes. A leopard does not change his spots. That's who they are, So we have that embedded in our DNA almost, right? And so why would we think that a Klansman or Klanswoman would change? That's who they are, right? But we're wrong. Yes, a tiger and leopard cannot change their stripes and spots. They're born with those stripes and spots. Those are immutable characteristics. But a Klansman or Klanswoman or a neo-Nazi is not born with that robe and hood or that swastika. That is acquired. It's learned behavior, learned ideology. What can be learned can be unlearned. It may take some time, but it can be done. So it always makes me feel happy when somebody sees the light and they give it up. Now, there have been plenty who've seen the light that I don't know. It happens indirectly as well.
Roger, that was his name?
Yes, Roger Kelly, yes.
What did he say to you when he decided to leave?
He called me up. And because he and I would go out for dinner every now and then, or lunch or whatever, or just hang out. Because he was learning a lot about me, and he was helping me learn a lot about the Klan for my book that I was writing. And he called me up one day and said, I've got something I want to tell you. And I said, okay. And he says, can we meet for dinner? I said, sure. I said, you want to tell me now? He goes, no, let's meet. I said, okay. So we met up in Frederick, and I had dinner, and he tells me, you're the only other person who knows right now, other than my Grand Dragon. He was now an Imperial Wizard, and so somebody else took the Grand Dragon spot. And I said, what's that? He goes, I'm leaving the Klan. I'm shutting it down. Now, he wasn't handing it off to his second in command. He was shutting down his chapters. Okay, and he had like 13 of them in 13 different states. And I was totally shocked. That was not what I expected from him. I've seen other Klan people quit. He wasn't the first that quit, in my relationships. But he was a leader and a national leader, and it kind of surprised me because when you rise to that level, to the top level, Imperial Wizard, or even at a Grand Dragon level, you have a lot of power. You have a lot of people who respect you. Not me, not non-clan people, but within the clan, they respect you, right? You're like a celebrity to them. You know, they look up to you, and when you've reached that point, you have recruited a lot of people into your group, and now you're a national leader. How are you going to tell your constituents, "Hey, people, I was wrong"? Okay, that's a very tough thing to do. And do you want it? Do you really want to give up all that power, you know, and have people, you know, frown upon you that you brought into the organization? So you know, he struggled with that, and he finally, you know, came to the point that you know he needs to do this. He's seen something different, and he wants to get out of it.
During your friendship with Roger, you found yourself at Klan meetings, right? At some of their rallies or, you know, things like that. How many of those would you say you've been to? Like dozens, hundreds?
Well, not just Roger Kelly, but many all over the country. Yeah, I've been to, no, I wouldn't say 100 rallies, but I've been to, gosh, many, probably 24 rallies and meetings and things like that. I've even spoken at a Klan meeting and a Klan rally.
Were you ever afraid when you were at those rallies?
No, I was not afraid. It's sort of surreal to be there and see these people in robes and hoods marching around and lighting this big cross on fire and then proclaiming white power and all. It's very surreal. But no, I wasn't afraid, and I'll tell you why. Have I been threatened? Have I had some fights with some Klansmen? Yes. You know, I've had to be violent because violence was enacted upon me, so I had to defend myself. Not at the rallies, but out on the street and things like that, with some encounters with some people. There are two kinds of rallies. You have public rallies, and you have private rallies, and I've been to both. A public rally is when they go to City Hall and get a permit to hold a rally at the park over here on Main Street or something, right? That's public. It's a public park. So you can go, I can go, anybody can go. Now, if there's going to be contention, people, you know, bringing bricks and rocks to throw at the Klan or whatever, there's going to be a barrage of police law enforcement surrounding them so you cannot get to them, right? Because our Constitution guarantees you the right to free speech and the right to freedom of assembly. So even though you may not agree with their precedent or their ideology, you have to agree to let them have that right if you want the same right. All right? So the police are there to protect those rights, and you can't get to them. If it's in some rural area where, you know, everybody in the place is, you know, sympathetic or members, then, you know, you can walk right up to them. Okay, so that's a public rally. A private rally is where a Klansman or Klanswoman has a rally on their property. Some of them own farms or a lot of acreage or whatever, and so, you know, you can have a rally here on my farm, right? Well, you just can't, you know, walk onto somebody's property unless you're invited. So you get invited by the Grand Dragon or Imperial Wizard, then you can go to the private rally. There will be Klan people there who will not like you being there because you're black or because you're Jewish or because you're gay or you're Muslim or whatever it is they don't like. They may not like you there, but because their leader invited you, they have to respect the leader's wishes, and they won't do anything. So you're safe.
This whole process started with a question when you were 10.
Yes, how can you hate me when you don't even know me?
What do you feel like the answer is after your research?
Well, there have been two answers, and the both answers are the same, the initial one and the concluding one. I'll give you an example of the initial one. So how can you hate me if you don't even know me? Well, Mr. Davis, you have to understand one thing. Black people are prone to crime. And this is evidenced by the fact that there are more blacks in prison than whites. The data shows that. Well, guess what? He's 100% right. Not that we are prone to crime, but that there are more black people in prison than white people. All right? The data does show that. The data does not explain why they're in prison. It just gives you the percentages, whatever. So I'm told that. Uh, he's not considering the fact that there is an imbalance in our judicial system that sends blacks to prison for more time than it would give a white person in the same criminal activity or whatever, right? Goes on to say that black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. The larger the brain, the more capacity for intelligence. The smaller the brain, the lower the person's IQ. And he tells me that, black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. And he tells me that this is evidenced by the fact that every year black high school kids score lower on the SATs, the Scholastic Aptitude Tests, than white kids do. Yes, that is true. The data does support that fact. And so that's all he needs. He already believes that, and now you have this body of data that supports it. He doesn't need to know why or any other research. It supports what he believes, so he doesn't bother to look any further. So yes, that is true, but the data does not explain why. Where do most black kids in the United States go to school? They go to school in the inner city. Where do most white kids go to school? They go to school in the suburbs. Fact of the matter is, inner city schools are not as well funded as public schools in the suburbs. They don't have the equipment, the textbooks, the quality of teachers. I will guarantee you that black kids who go to school in the suburbs can score just as high, if not higher, than white kids. White kids who go to school in the inner city can score just as low, if not lower, than some of those black kids. It has absolutely nothing to do with the color of the student's skin. It has everything to do with the educational system in which that child is enrolled, which is why your parents, my parents, and if you are a parent, if you move neighborhoods, first thing you want to do is, what are the schools like around here for my kids? You want to make sure that your child is in a good school system. That's why education is so important, right? So he doesn't look at all that. He just sees the data supporting what he says, right? So, these are some of the reasons why a lot of them don't like somebody else. They feel that they're superior because the data helps them understand this. We're in jail. We have low scores on our SATs. But I also point out the fact that in this country, the people who score the highest on the SAT scores are Asian kids. So does that mean that Asians must have a brain this big? No. They have a certain work ethic. They work very hard and they study very hard. That's the culture. We need more of that culture. We all, meaning all people, white, black, otherwise, right? So that we too can be up there in their rankings. And we can learn to do that. We need to change our culture, how we study, etc. So anyway, these are some of the reasons why they felt that that black people are inferior and they don't like them. All right. So then at the end, when we started here and we've gotten here, and then they quit and give up their robe and hood, etc., I asked the question again, and then now the second answer is, Daryl, I really don't know why I hated you. I really had no reason.
As you're having these conversations and you're explaining these things and adding context maybe to their perspective, how were you able to maintain your composure when people are saying things that may personally offend you or people you know or love or, a group that you are a part of, right? Like, how were you able to explain these things without being personally offended or,
Yes, that is an excellent question. And a lot of people, think that way. I could never sit down with somebody like that. I would go off on them or, or whatever. Number one, a couple things. One, I believe, this is me speaking, that racism is an illness. It's a mental illness. I believe that. It's one that can be cured. You're not born with that illness, but, you become in that environment, you're going to catch it. Like if you're in a COVID environment, chances are you're going to get it, right? It can be cured. All right, it's an illness. So, do you go off on somebody who's sick? Help them get better. That's number one. You have the antidote. Share it with them. Show them a better way so they can heal. All right. Number two, always know who you are, all right, before going into a situation with somebody who may be disagreeable, all right. This doesn't matter whether it's racial, whether it's political, whether it's something, hot topic, abortion, the nuclear weapons, the war between Gaza and Israel, Russia and Ukraine, Donald Trump invading Venezuela. All right, these are all hot topics. You're on one side, somebody else is on the other side, right? Learn as much as you can about the other person's position, but go in knowing who you are. All right, be open to hear other things that may, disagree with what you have, and think about those things, and maybe your perspective will change. All right, but at least know who you are, because if you go into a situation with your opponent not knowing who you are, they're going to tell you who you are, and you might walk out believing them. So always know who you are. So are these things offensive? Black people have a small brain. Black people are criminals. Yes, they are offensive things to say. Am I offended? Absolutely not. Why am I not offended? Because what he's telling me is a lie. It does not apply to me. I don't have a criminal record. My SATs got me into college. I have a college degree. He barely made it out of high school. So obviously he doesn't know what he's talking about. Why should I be offended by a lie? That's what I'm talking about. Know who you are going in.
That's a word, Mr. Davis. That's a word. That's so good. To your point, too, about kind of current events. Mm-hmm. So how do you think your approach of trying to build understanding with people who are different from you can translate to what we're seeing today in a world that is so polarized and where people don't want to engage with people who think differently than them?
Well, I see it all over. Okay, the State Department has sent me to Israel, India, Poland, Belgium, and many other countries to speak, all right, on conflict. Not every country has the same kind of conflict we have here, where it's based on the color of your skin. But it could be religious differences, like say in Israel, or say in Ireland, it's Catholics and Protestants who are like this. Over here, it doesn't matter if you're Catholic and I'm Protestant. We don't even care, right? But in some places, it's a thing, right? So the same thing applies. And here's something that I can share with you, Brianna. I have been to like 65 countries on 6 continents. I have played in all 50 states. What does that mean other than I have a lot of frequent flyer miles and hotel points? What it means is that I have been, when you combine my childhood travels, now my adulthood travels, it makes a total of about 65 countries. I've gone through several passports because they fill up. I can tell you this, that no matter how far I've gone from our country, the United States, whether it's right next door to Canada, or right next door to Mexico, or halfway around the globe, no matter how different the people may be from me that I encounter, they don't look like me maybe, they don't speak my language, they don't worship as I do, maybe they don't even worship at all. I've always concluded one thing: every single person I've met on this planet, regardless of what we have in common, what we have in difference, is a human being. And I can tell you this, every human being on this planet wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be respected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else would want for their family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or in a culture or society in which we are unfamiliar or uncomfortable, I'll guarantee you that your navigation of that situation, that culture, that society will be much more smooth, much more positive, and much more productive. And that's how I comport myself when I'm with these people. I realize they have not seen a lot of the things that I've seen. They have not had the experiences that I've had. That does not make me, all this travel and exposure does not make me a better human being than someone with less travel. But what it does is it does give me a better and broader perspective on humanity than those people who've not experienced that, right? My favorite quote of all time is by Mark Twain. Samuel Clemens, his pen name was Mark Twain. It's called the Travel Quote. And Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. Many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And that is so true. When you travel, you see things you never suspected, never knew about, and it broadens your horizons. So, I'm glad to have been a part and continue to be a part of some people's lives that have been able to be opened up. And I'll tell you something. I give a ton of lectures every year, mostly during non-COVID years, right, when you couldn't go out. But 2 to 3, I speak at corporations, colleges, universities, high schools, civic organizations, churches, synagogues, police departments, etc. But I'll say this, 2 to 3 out of every 10 lectures I give, mostly on a college campus, this will happen. I'll do the lecture, I'll do the Q&A, I'll show some robes and hoods that I've got or whatever. At the end of the lecture, there'll still be some students who want to ask, one last question, or they want to see one of the robes up close. So they approach the podium. 2 to 3 out of 10 times, there's going to be some student hanging in the back of the auditorium. And I've come to learn what that person is up to. They're waiting for the crowd to go away from the podium. And I'm there by myself putting stuff back together. He or she will come down and they'll look around, make sure nobody's within earshot. "Oh, hi, Mr. Davis, I enjoyed your lecture." "Thank you." Shake their hand, and I know what's going to happen. I just lay back and let it come out. My mother is in the Klan, or my dad's a neo-Nazi or white power skinhead, and I was raised like that. And now I'm here at University of fill in the blank, whichever one you want to fill in, and my boyfriend is Jewish, or my girlfriend is black, or my best friend is gay, or my best friend's a Muslim. I can't bring that person home. My parents will kill me. My friends will disown me. And I don't want to tell my friend because they'll drop me. So they have this secret that is sitting on their chest, just burning an ulcer in there. It has to come out. Who do you talk to? You can't talk to your parents about it. They'll freak out, right? So I'm the perfect person for them to unload on. And so we'll go somewhere we won't be bothered and we'll talk, I totally get it, because some of these people come from some rural or whatever homogenous area in which everybody goes to the same high school, they all vote for the same political candidate, they shop at the same grocery store, swim at the same community swimming pool, etc. So everything's homogenous. Now, this person leaves and goes to college. On that college campus, the neighborhood and high school from which he or she came doesn't come to that campus. But on that campus, there are neighborhoods and high school kids from all over the country, even from around the world. So you're seeing a lot of stuff that you don't see back home. And you're realizing that Jewish people don't have horns, and black people don't have tails, and all kinds of things. How do you go home and tell your parents that they were wrong? And your high school buddies. Your parents wanted you to go get an education, but not that education, right? So, I see a lot of that. And once you learn these things, you can't unlearn them, You can unlearn bad behavior, but once you ring the bell, you can't unring it. You see some Jewish person that does not fit the stereotype that you were taught back home, or some black person or some gay person or what have you. You try to look for that person. Are there stereotypes? Sure there are. But there's also a whole plethora of people that don't fit the stereotype. So that's the cognitive dissonance.
What would you say to people about the importance of talking to, building relationship and understanding with people that are different from them?
Okay, so people think, who live here, Americans, my fellow Americans, they think that this is the greatest country in the world, even though many of them have never even been outside the country. According to our U.S. Census Bureau, less than 40% of Americans even own a passport. Now, Europeans, they travel all the time. They're always going somewhere. And they are a lot more worldly than most Americans. They know more about different countries in the world and cultures, etc. It doesn't make them better people, but it does make them more knowledgeable on that topic because they've been exposed to it. So if you consider that if you think that you are living in the greatest country in the world, what has made it so great is its diversity. Everybody in this country is an immigrant, with the exception of people like me, who descended from slaves. Slaves did not immigrate here. We were forced here. So slaves and Native American Indians, those are the only two groups of people in this country who are not immigrants. So whatever white person, whatever other kind of person, whatever, is an immigrant. And it's the diversity of all these people, slaves, Native Americans, white people from Europe, Asians from wherever, Hispanics from wherever, or Latinos. We all have contributed to the great fabric of this country. And we can't forget that. It doesn't matter how many generations deep you've been here. Somebody was here before you. You know?
That's great. Good. Anything else you want to add that we haven't touched on?
Yeah. I want to tell you what's going on. Why we're seeing all this. I learned this in 1982 from the then head of the American Nazi Party. The American Nazi Party was formed right about 35 minutes from where we're sitting, right over across the Potomac in Arlington, Virginia, by a fellow named George Lincoln Rockwell. George Lincoln Rockwell was a big proponent of the ideology of Adolf Hitler. Every time Martin Luther King would have marches, Rockwell and his stormtroopers would confront King and stuff. Rockwell's right-hand guy was a guy named Matt Koehl, Koehl. I went to high school here in Rockville. When I was a sophomore, I was taking a 12th grade class. It was here in Montgomery County. It was called the POTC, which stood for Problems of the 20th Century. We had a phenomenal teacher. It was 1974. He would invite in different controversial speakers or whatever to talk about whatever, abortion, this, that, and the other. And we would listen and we could question these people. On this day in 1974, in my POTC class, he invited the head of the American Nazi Party. You could never do that today, right? I'm glad we were able to do that back then. I think we should return to that. You know, invite these people, let them speak so we can see how stupid they are. You know, that's my opinion, and then we can try to fix it. You can't fix what you can't see. So, you know, they're afraid to do that because they're afraid somebody's going to fall through the cracks and get recruited. That can happen, but you can fix that too. All right, so anyway, George Lincoln Rockwell, the founder of the American Nazi Party, was murdered right out on Wilson Boulevard in Arlington by one of his own Nazis. He got into an argument with a guy named John Poulter, and John Poulter shot and killed him. So when Rockwell died, his right-hand guy, Matt Koehl, took over the organization. And Matt Koehl's right-hand guy was a guy named Martin Kerr. On this day, 1974, Matt Koehl and Martin Kerr came to my POTC class. And they stood in the front of the class espousing the views of white supremacy. Matt Koehl pointed at me and pointed at another black guy in the classroom and said, "We're going to ship you back to Africa." And then he went like this, "And all you Jews out there, you're going back to Israel." And I just sat, I'm 15 years old. I just sat there looking at the guy like, what is this man talking about? I didn't say anything. One of my classmates, she said, "They live here. What if they don't want to go?" And Matt Koehl said, "Oh, they have no choice. If they do not leave voluntarily, they will be exterminated in the upcoming race war." That was the first time I heard the term race war. Again, I'm thinking, what is he talking about? Again, I didn't say anything to him. Later on that day, I was in the hallway by my locker. I was the only one in the hallway. Matt Cole and Martin Kerr were leaving. They'd been there all day for other PLTC classes. They had to walk past me. They stopped right in front of me. They didn't say anything to me, but they glared at me and sneered at me. And then they went on down the hall and left. I never forgot that. 8 years later, I'm now 2 years out of college. I graduated 2 years ago from college. So now we're talking about 1982. I graduated in 1980. I went looking for Matt Cole, and I found him, and I confronted him. I didn't confront him in school, but I confronted him now. And he remembered me. And we talked for about, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes. He told me a lot of lies, but one thing he told me was true. This is in 1982. He and white supremacists at large are very concerned about the year 2042. Right? The U.S. Census is taken every decade. So the last one was taken in 2020. The next one will be in 2030. You can fact check me. Just go to uscensus.gov or whatever and look at the trends. When I was a child, when I was like first born or whatever, 58 or whatever, same thing for you. You're not as old as I am though, but some things don't change. The black population in this country was 12%. All right. Native Americans, 1%. Latino Hispanic Americans, 2%. Asian Pacific Islander Americans, 3%. Whites were like 86 to 87%. Every decade, this is happening. All right. Today, in the last census, 2020, we're still 12%. They say 12.9, so they say 13%. We, meaning black people. So we really haven't grown. Native Americans remain at 1%. Asian Pacific Islanders have doubled from 3% to almost 6%. Latino Hispanic Americans have more than quadrupled to 17 point something percent. So if you take just 12% black, 17% Latino or Hispanic, that right there, let alone everybody else, that right there is 29% non-white. This is happening, all right? It is well predicted in the year 2042, which is only 16 years from now, for the first time in U.S. history, this country will be 50-50. Between 2040, meaning 50% white, 50% non-white. Between 2045 and 2050, it's going to flip. And white people will become the minority in this country. There are plenty of white people in this country, plenty of them, who don't care. They say, hey, no big deal, that doesn't bother me. It's evolution, you know. No, what's the problem, right? But then there is a slice of our white population that does care. And those are the ones that I deal with, right? And what they're telling me is, you know, whether it's the Proud Boys, the Patriot Front, the Klan, the neo-Nazis, whatever, what they tell me is, Daryl, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America, or white genocide through miscegenation, through race mixing, right? This is why we're seeing an uptick in lone wolves, all right? When I first started this work, now 46 years ago, you had the Ku Klux Klan, you had neo-Nazis, you had what were called white power skinheads, all right? Today you got the Klan, the neo-Nazis, the white power skinheads, the Aryan nations, the Vanguard, the Patriot Front, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, on and on and on and on. And they're all saying, come join us, we're going to take back our country. So people out of fear, because I know some of these people, and they truly feel that they are patriots. I'm an American, you know, it's my duty to protect this country. We built it, meaning white people, we built this country, we wrote the Constitution, and now people are coming here who don't look like us and are taking our country away from us. So they feel it's their patriotic duty to protect the country. And they run and join these groups. When the group fails to take back our country in a timely manner, some of these people, they get antsy. Say, you know what, if the Klan can't do it or the neo-Nazis can't do it, I'll do it myself. And they walk into a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, the AME church. Boom, 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 right? And murder 9 people doing Bible study. They walk into the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. murder 11 Jewish people. They walk into the Buffalo grocery store, the Walmart in El Paso, and murder 23 Hispanic people. These people, they're doing this on their own. These people are called lone wolves. And as we get closer and closer to 2042, unfortunately, we're going to see more of these lone wolves. They have the mentality that they are patriots. They got to fight for the country. Every time one of these lone wolves is shot and killed by law enforcement or captured or whatever, they go and raid the person's property. They always find a cache of automatic weapons that are being stockpiled for the race war. White supremacist terms for the race war, they call it RAHOWA, R-A-H-O-W-A, RAHOWA, which are the first two letters of three words, racial holy war, RAHOWA, okay? If you ever hear that term, it's the white supremacist term for the race war. They also call it the boogaloo, not to be confused with the 1960s dance music known as boogaloo, right? That's just their term for the race war. And they're very serious about this, and this is why we're seeing all these lone wolves. Why do you think Donald Trump wanted Canada to become the 51st state? To get that other balance going. All right. So this is what's going on today. A lot of people don't talk about it, but there was an article in the New York Times and also in the Wall Street Journal back in 2008 about this. I learned it in 1982 from the head of the American Nazi Party. That's one of the few things that he told me that was true.
It's very interesting. Well, thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.